My husband forgot Mother's Day, but he remembered his female colleague's birthday with diamonds. I spent 8 years building a life with a man who made me feel like I was the center of his universe. He held my hand through childbirth, stayed up with me during sleepless nights, and whispered promises of forever against my skin. I thought we were a team. I thought we were unbreakable, but Mother's Day changed everything. Not because of what happened that day, but because of what I discovered a few weeks later. A receipt tucked into the pocket of his jacket. A jeweler's receipt dated the day before, Mother's Day. He'd bought diamond earrings, expensive ones, for his female colleague's birthday. He gave her diamonds while I got nothing but silence and excuses. And in that moment, I realized that the man I'd married had been living a separate life, one where I wasn't even a supporting character. The morning of Mother's Day started like every other morning in our household, chaotic, loud, and powered by caffeine. I was up at 6. The same time I'd been waking up for the past 4 years, ever since our first daughter, Lily, was born. My feet hit the cold floor before my brain fully registered the day. I shuffled to the kitchen, started the coffee maker, and began the familiar dance of preparing breakfast while keeping one ear tuned to the baby monitor. In the next room, I was 36 years old, a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm, and the mother of 2 beautiful children. Lily was 4. A whirlwind of questions and boundless energy. And Noah was 18 months, still wobbly on his feet but determined to conquer the world one unsteady step at a time. My life was a juggling act of deadlines, diaper changes, and dinner prep. I was exhausted more often than not, but I was happy. At least I thought I was. My husband Nathan was still asleep. He worked long hours at his finance job, often coming home after the kids were already in bed. I'd stopped complaining about it months ago. What was the point? He was providing for our family, and I was grateful. I told myself that this was just a season of life, that things would slow down eventually, that we'd find our way back to each other when the kids were older. I told myself a lot of things. The first sign that something was wrong came when I checked my phone. My social media feed was flooded with Mother's Day posts. Photos of brunches, flowers, handwritten cards, women holding up gifts with tearful smiles. I scrolled through them while sipping my coffee, feeling a small pang of anticipation. Nathan wasn't great at remembering special occasions, but he usually came through at the last minute. He'd run out to the store, grab a bouquet of grocery store roses and a card, and present them with a sheepish grin. It wasn't romantic, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. By 9 o'clock, Nathan still hadn't surfaced. I made breakfast for the kids, changed diapers, and cleaned up spilled cereal, while Lily chattered about the cartoon she'd watched. Noah banged his spoon against his high chair tray, sending oatmeal splatters across the table. I wiped them up without a word. This was motherhood. It was thankless and relentless. But I loved it. I loved them. At 10, Nathan shuffled into the kitchen, his hair sticking up in odd directions, still wearing his pajama pants. He grunted a greeting, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table to scroll through his phone. I watched him from the stove, where I was scrambling eggs for the 3rd time that morning. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Happy Mother's Day." Nathan looked up, his expression briefly confused. "Oh, right. Yeah, Happy Mother's Day." He looked back down at his phone. I waited for more. A hug, a card, something, but the silence stretched between us, awkward and heavy. I turned back to the stove, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. Maybe he had a surprise planned for later. The day continued. I took the kids to the park while Nathan worked on some emails. I made lunch, did laundry, and tried to keep Lily entertained while Noah napped. By 3 in the afternoon, the knot in my stomach had tightened into a ball of disappointment. I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Nathan," I said, standing in the doorway of his home office, "did you forget to get me something for Mother's Day?" He looked up from his laptop, his face a mask of mild irritation. "I told you this morning. Happy Mother's Day." "That's not what I mean. I mean a card, a gift, anything," he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry, babe. It's been a crazy week. I didn't have time to get anything. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I'm just so busy right now. You know how it is." I nodded, because what else could I do? I didn't want to be the nagging wife. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, but the disappointment was a physical weight in my chest. I'd spent 4 years being a mother, and on the one day that was supposed to acknowledge my sacrifice, I got nothing but a half-hearted apology. The rest of the evening was quiet. I put the kids to bed, read them stories, and kissed their soft foreheads. Nathan retreated to his office. I sat alone on the couch, watching a movie I wasn't paying attention to, wondering when I'd stopped being a priority. I told myself to let it go. It was just a day. It didn't define our marriage. Nathan loved me, even if he was forgetful. I'd probably been too hard on him. He was stressed, overworked, trying to provide for us. I was being selfish. I carried those thoughts with me for the next few weeks. I buried my hurt under a blanket of justification. Nathan's job was demanding. We had a mortgage to pay. I was lucky to have a husband who worked so hard for our family. I repeated these mantras to myself until I almost believed them. Then I found the receipt. It was a Thursday evening, about 3 weeks after Mother's Day. I was tidying up the bedroom, gathering Nathan's work clothes to take to the dry cleaner. I reached into the pocket of his suit jacket to check for pens or loose change, and my fingers brushed against a slip of paper. I pulled it out, expecting a receipt for lunch or parking. What I found made my blood freeze. It was from a local jeweler, the kind of jeweler that didn't sell costume jewelry, the kind that dealt in diamonds and gold. The receipt was dated the day before Mother's Day. Diamond stud earrings, 14 karat, Gold setting. Total $3,450. I stared at the numbers. My vision blurred. I read the date again, as if somehow I'd misread it, but it was clear. The day before Mother's Day. The day before he'd forgotten to get me anything. My heart pounded. My hands trembled. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for him. All the times I'd told myself he was just busy, just forgetful, just overwhelmed. I'd convinced myself that his love was there, even if he didn't show it in the ways I needed. I'd been so desperate to believe in us that I'd ignored the evidence right in front of my face. I wasn't the person who was supposed to see this receipt. It wasn't hidden. It was just there, like he hadn't even cared enough to hide it. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the receipt still clutched in my hand. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was a gift for his mother? No. He hadn't given his mother anything either, and she'd called him to complain about it. Maybe it was for a client, a business expense, but diamond earrings for a client? That didn't make sense. And then the thought I'd been avoiding came crashing into my head. Another woman. He'd bought diamond earrings for another woman. I remembered the way he'd been working late, the way he'd become distant, distracted, the way he'd seemed more interested in his phone than in me. I'd attributed it to job stress. I'd told myself he was just tired. But now, all those small suspicions coalesced into something undeniable. I walked to his office. He was still working, tapping away at his keyboard with the intensity of a man who had nothing to hide. I stood in the doorway, the receipt crumpled in my fists. "Who are the earrings for?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Nathan looked up, startled. "What? The earrings?" I said, holding up the receipt. $3,450 worth of diamond earrings. Who are they for? His face went pale. His eyes darted to the receipt, then back to me. I saw the panic flicker across his expression, the frantic calculation behind his eyes. He was trying to come up with a lie. "I was going to give them to you," he said, his voice too quick, "for Mother's Day. But I forgot. They're still in my car. I meant to wrap them. I'm so sorry. I just got caught up." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't lie to me." His mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "The day before Mother's Day," I said slowly, "you bought diamond earrings, and then you forgot to give them to me? You forgot to give your wife $3,000 worth of jewelry on the day that was supposed to be about her?" Nathan swallowed. "It sounds bad when you say it like that." "Because it is bad," I said, my voice rising. "Because it's not true. You didn't forget. You bought those earrings for someone else. Who is she, Nathan? Who did you give them to?" He was quiet for a long moment. I could see the resignation settling over him, the realization that he was cornered. He'd been caught, and he knew it. "Her name is Lauren," he said finally. "She works with me. It was her birthday last week, and she's been having a tough time. Her father just passed away, and I felt sorry for her. I wanted to cheer her up." I stared at him. "You felt sorry for her, so you bought her diamond earrings? On the day before Mother's Day, when you didn't even buy me a card?" Nathan winced. "It wasn't like that. It was just a gesture, a friendly gesture. She's going through a lot, and I thought..." "You thought what?" I demanded. "You thought it was appropriate to spend thousands of dollars on another woman? You thought it was okay to give her diamonds while you left your wife with nothing? You thought I wouldn't find out?" He stood up, reaching for me. "Avery, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I stepped back, my hands shaking. "Explain why the woman you work with matters more to you than your own wife? Explain why you remembered her birthday but forgot Mother's Day? Explain why you had to buy her diamonds while I was sitting at home, feeling invisible?" He didn't have an answer. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. I felt like a fool. A complete, utter fool. I'd spent years making excuses for this man, convincing myself that his neglect was just a side effect of his demanding job. I'd rationalized every empty promise, every forgotten anniversary, every moment he chose his career over our family. And all the while, he was showering another woman with gifts. "Get out," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to look at you right now." "Avery, please!" Out. He left. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard the front door open and close, and then I was alone, standing in the middle of his office, clutching a receipt that had destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I sank into his desk chair and let myself cry. The next few days were a blur of confrontation and silence. Nathan tried to explain, to apologize, to make me understand that it wasn't what I thought, but I didn't want explanations. I wanted the truth, and the truth was that he had prioritized another woman over me, not just once, but in a way that felt calculated. He'd spent money we could barely afford on a gift for someone else. He'd remembered her birthday, while forgetting the day that was supposed to honor the mother of his children. He'd made me feel like I was invisible, and then he'd tried to gaslight me into believing I was overreacting. I started digging. I checked his phone when he was asleep. I found messages between him and Lauren, conversations that stretched late into the night, little inside jokes and shared complaints about work. I found photos of them at coffee shops, at happy hour, at a conference in Chicago. Nothing overtly romantic, nothing explicit, but the intimacy was there. The kind of intimacy that should have been reserved for a spouse. I called Lauren. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail, my voice trembling with a rage I couldn't quite contain. "This is Nathan's wife. I know about the earrings. I'd appreciate it if you kept your distance from my husband." She called me back 2 days later. Her voice was soft, apologetic. apologetic. She insisted she didn't know Nathan was married. She said he'd told her he was separated. She said she'd never have accepted the gift if she'd known the truth. I didn't know if I believed her. I didn't care. The damage was done. Lauren's phone call didn't give me closure. It just opened more questions. She told me she was sorry. She told me Nathan had been a shoulder to cry on after her father died. She told me the earrings were too much, and she'd felt uncomfortable accepting them, but Nathan had insisted. She told me she'd always thought he was single. She told me she'd never have gotten involved if she'd known he had a family. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe she was just as much a victim of Nathan's lies as I was. But I couldn't muster any sympathy for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because whether she knew or not, she'd been part of something that had shattered my life. She'd been the recipient of the love and attention that should have been mine, and I couldn't separate her from that pain. After I hung up, I sat on the floor of our bedroom, my back against the bed frame, and stared at the wall. The silence in the house was deafening. The kids were at my mother's house for the weekend. I'd told her I needed a break, that I was exhausted and overwhelmed. I hadn't told her the real reason. I wasn't ready to admit that my marriage was falling apart. Nathan had been staying at a hotel for the past 3 nights. He called me twice a day, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to defensive to pleading. I listened to every single one, but I never called back. I didn't have anything to say to him. Not yet. I needed to understand what had happened before I could even think about forgiveness. I started going through our finances. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. If I was going to leave him, I needed to know what I was dealing with. What I found made my stomach churn. There were charges I didn't recognize. Fancy restaurants, a spa weekend, a hotel in a city where Nathan had supposedly been on a business trip. The receipts were careful. Almost like he'd been expecting someone to look, but not careful enough. He'd used our joint credit card for most of it, hiding the expenses in the noise of our everyday spending. A few $100s here, a few hundred there, it added up to thousands. Money we could have used for the kids' college fund. Money we could have used for the vacation we'd been planning for years. Money he'd spent on another woman while I was home clipping coupons. I confronted him the next day. He came to the house, his face pale and drawn, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I met him in the living room, a stack of printed bank statements on the coffee table between us. Explain, I said, my voice flat. Nathan looked at the papers and his face crumpled. Avery, I can explain. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me, I said, cutting him off. Explain why there are charges for a spa. Weekend in Napa when you told me you were in Chicago for a conference. Explain why you spent almost $4,000 on hotels and restaurants that I never saw. Explain why you bought diamond earrings for another woman while your own wife didn't even get a card on Mother's Day. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. The words wouldn't come. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. Let me help you, I said. You were having an affair, an emotional one at the very least, and probably a physical one too. You were spending our money on her. You were lying to me about where you were and what you were doing. You were living a double life and I was too blind to see it. It wasn't an affair, he said quickly. It wasn't like that. She was just a friend. I was trying to help her through a hard time. By buying her diamonds? I laughed, a hollow sound. Nathan, you didn't buy me diamonds for our 10th anniversary. You bought me a gift card to a bookstore. Do you remember that? He flinched. That was different. How was it different? Because she was more important than me? Because she deserved the expensive gifts and I didn't? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I demanded, my voice rising. What was she to you that I wasn't? What did she give you that I couldn't? Nathan fell silent. He stared at the floor, his hands clasped in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. She made me feel seen. The words hit me like a physical blow. Seen? I repeated. You felt seen by her. And what about me? What did I make you feel? Taken for granted, he admitted. I know that's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. It was me. He paused, struggling to find the words. I was drowning. The job, the kids, the mortgage, everything. I felt like I was just going through the motions. And nobody noticed. And then Lauren came along and she looked at me like I was interesting, like I was important. I couldn't resist that. I stared at him. This man I'd married, this man I'd loved. He was telling me that I'd made him feel invisible, that I'd taken him for granted, that I hadn't noticed he was drowning. And maybe there was some truth in that. Maybe I'd been so focused on the kids and my own exhaustion that I'd stopped paying attention to him. Maybe I'd been guilty of neglect too, but I'd never betrayed him. I'd never lied to him. I'd never spent thousands of dollars on another man. I took a deep breath. Nathan, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry you felt that way, but that doesn't excuse what you did. You made choices. You chose to lie to me. You chose to spend our money on someone else. You chose to prioritize her over your family. And you did it for months, maybe longer, without ever giving me the chance to fix what was broken. You didn't give us a chance. You just checked out. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I know I messed up, but I love you, Avery. I've always loved you. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake, but I want to fix it. I want to be better. Please, just give me a chance. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could change, that we could rebuild what we'd lost. But every time I looked at him, I saw Lauren. I saw the receipts. I saw the diamonds. I saw the proof that I hadn't been enough. I need time, I said finally. I need to figure out what I want, and I can't do that with you here. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. I'll go back to the hotel. But Avery, he reached for my hand and I let him take it. I'm not giving up on us. I'll fight for you. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't say anything. I didn't have the strength. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I went through the motions of daily life, taking the kids to school, going to work, making dinner, but everything felt hollow. I was a ghost in my own life, going through the motions without really being present. My mother noticed. My friends noticed. They asked what was wrong, and I gave them vague answers about stress and exhaustion. I wasn't ready to tell them the truth. I wasn't ready to admit that my marriage had failed. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Morrison was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. She didn't tell me what to do. She just asked questions and let me find my own answers. "What do you want, Avery?" she asked during one session. "Not what you think you should want, not what you're afraid to want. What do you actually want?" I thought about it for a long time. "I want to matter," I said finally. "I want to be someone's priority. I want to know that I'm loved, not just tolerated. I want to feel like I'm not invisible." "That's reasonable," she said. "But are you going to find that with Nathan?" The question hung in the air. I didn't have an answer. I started spending more time with my children. They were my anchor. The one thing that still felt real and solid in my crumbling world. Lily was too young to understand what was happening, but she could sense the tension. She'd climb into my lap and wrap her small arms around my neck, and I'd hold her for as long as she'd let me. Noah was still a baby, blissfully unaware of the chaos around him. I'd rock him to sleep and whisper promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I also started talking to my friends. Allison, my best friend since college, listened to me cry for hours. She didn't offer advice. She just held my hand and let me feel what I needed to feel. She told me I was strong, that I'd survive, that I deserved better. I didn't always believe her, but I was grateful for her words. And then there was the reckoning with Nathan's family. His mother called me one evening, her voice heavy with concern. "Avery, Nathan told me what happened. I'm so sorry. I raised him better than this." I didn't know what to say. I'd always felt like an outsider in Nathan's family. Like I was never quite good enough, but his mother was being kind, and I didn't want to push her away. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I appreciate that." "He's a good man," she continued. "He made a terrible mistake, but he's not a bad person. Please don't give up on him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was the one who'd been betrayed, that I was the one who'd been invisible, that I was the one who'd been lied to, but I didn't. I just said, "I'm trying not to." That conversation made me realize something important. Nathan's family would always be on his side. They'd always see him as the good man who'd made a mistake. And maybe they were right. Maybe he was a good man who'd made a terrible choice. But that didn't change what he'd done. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't make me feel less invisible. I started making a list. Not a list of pros and cons, but a list of what I needed to be happy. I wrote down everything I'd been missing in my marriage: respect, honesty, partnership, feeling like a priority. I looked at that list and realized that Nathan hadn't been giving me those things for a long time. Maybe he'd never given them to me. Maybe I'd just been too blind to see it. I thought about the future. Could I trust Nathan again? Could I look at him without seeing the receipt? Could I ever feel safe and secure in our marriage again? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't make a decision out of fear. I couldn't stay with him because I was afraid of being alone. I couldn't stay with him because I was afraid of what people would think. I had to make a choice based on what was best for me and for my children. The day I decided to ask for a divorce was the day I found out Lauren was pregnant. I didn't hear it from Nathan. I heard it from a mutual friend, someone who worked with both of them and didn't know the full story. She told me casually, like it was just office gossip. "Did you hear? Lauren's having a baby. She's been so secretive about it. I wonder who the father is." I felt the world tilt beneath me. I didn't say anything to the friend. I just excused myself, went to the bathroom, and threw up. When I confronted Nathan, he didn't deny it. His face went ashen, and I could see the guilt pouring out of him. "It was one time," he said. "Just one time. I didn't even think it was possible. I'm so sorry, Avery. I never meant for any of this to happen." One time? One time was all it took to destroy everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at him and felt nothing but cold, hard resolve. "I want a divorce," I said, "and I want full custody of the kids." "Avery, please don't," I said, holding up my hand. "Don't say anything. I've heard enough. I've heard enough lies, enough excuses, enough promises. I want a divorce, and I want you out of this house by the end of the week." He started to argue, but I walked away. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, feeling nothing, just emptiness, just numbness. The man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, the man I'd trusted with everything. He'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now there was a baby that would be a permanent reminder of his infidelity, a baby that would link him to another woman for the rest of his life. I realized something in that moment. I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my survival. I was fighting for my children. I was fighting for the life I deserved, and I was going to win. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday in November. I sat in the courtroom, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, watching the judge sign the papers that would officially end my marriage. Nathan sat on the other side of the room, his head bowed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He'd tried everything to stop this, pleading, bargaining, even showing up at my mother's house at midnight, drunk and crying. None of it changed my mind. None of it could undo what he'd done. The custody arrangement was straightforward. I got primary custody of Lily and Noah, with Nathan getting every other weekend and alternating holidays. He'd agreed without much of a fight. I think he knew he'd already lost too much to risk losing them completely. The financial settlement was less generous than I'd hoped, but it was fair. I got the house, the car, and a lump sum that would cover the kids' education. Nathan got to keep his retirement account and his freedom. I didn't ask for more. I just wanted to move on. The hardest part was telling the children. Lily was 5 by then, old enough to understand that something was wrong, but too young to grasp the complexity of it all. I sat her down in her bedroom, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, and tried to explain in words she could understand. "Daddy and I love you very much," I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "But we can't live together anymore. We're going to have 2 houses now. You'll stay with me most of the time, and you'll see Daddy on weekends." Lily looked at me with her big brown eyes, the same eyes as her father's. "Is it because of the baby?" she asked. My heart shattered. "What baby, sweetheart?" "Ms. Lauren's baby. Daddy said she's going to have a baby. Is that why you're sad?" I didn't know what to say. Nathan had told her about the pregnancy. He'd told my 5-year-old daughter that he was having a baby with another woman, and he hadn't even given me the courtesy of warning me. The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't let Lily see that. "No, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into my arms. "It's not about the baby. It's about grown-up things that you don't need to worry about. The most important thing is that you and Noah are loved. That will never change. Do you understand?" Lily nodded slowly, her small face still clouded with confusion. She didn't understand. Not really, but she trusted me, and that was enough for now. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I went back to work full-time, throwing myself into projects with a focus I hadn't felt in years. My boss noticed. I got a promotion, a raise, and a corner office with a window that overlooked the city. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was mine. I started therapy twice a week. Dr. Morrison helped me untangle the mess of emotions that had been festering inside me. We talked about my childhood, my patterns of people-pleasing, my tendency to put everyone else's needs before my own. I realized that I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love, trying to prove that I was worthy, and I'd been doing it with Nathan too. "You gave him everything," Dr. Morrison said one afternoon, "and he gave you very little in return, but you kept giving anyway, hoping that eventually he'd match your effort. That's not love, Avery. That's hope, and hope without evidence is just wishful thinking." The words hit me like a revelation. I'd been hoping for so long that I'd stopped seeing the reality in front of me. Nathan had never been the partner I needed. He'd been absent, dismissive, and ultimately unfaithful, and I'd enabled it all by never demanding more. I stopped hoping. I started living. The first Christmas after the divorce was the hardest. The kids were with Nathan on Christmas Eve, and I spent the night alone in my house, surrounded by twinkling lights and the ghost of holidays past. I'd always loved Christmas. I'd always been the one to decorate the tree, bake the cookies, wrap the presents with care. But this year, the house felt empty. I felt empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, staring at the ornaments hanging from the branches. Each one held a memory. Lily's first Christmas, the handprint ornament she'd made in preschool, the wooden snowflake Noah had painted last year. I missed them. I missed the chaos and the noise and the sticky fingers. I missed being a family. But I didn't miss Nathan. That was the realization that saved me. I didn't miss him. I missed the idea of him, the fantasy of a perfect marriage that had never really existed. But the man himself, the man who'd lied to me, cheated on me, and broken my heart, I didn't miss him at all. I felt nothing but relief that he was gone. I started dating again about a year later. It was awkward and terrifying. I'd been out of the game for so long that I didn't know the rules anymore. My first few dates were disasters. A guy who talked about his ex-wife the entire time. A man who tried to kiss me before the appetizers arrived. A tech executive who spent the evening checking his phone. I came home from each date feeling discouraged, wondering if I was destined to be alone forever. But then I met Andrew. He was a teacher at Noah's preschool. We'd exchanged polite nods at drop-off and pickup, but we'd never had a real conversation. One afternoon, Noah was crying, and Andrew knelt down to comfort him with a gentleness that made my heart ache. He talked to my son like he was a person, not just a child. He listened. He cared. "You're Noah's mom, right?" he said, standing up and offering me a warm smile. "I'm Andrew. I've seen you around." I smiled back, feeling a flutter I hadn't felt in years. "Yes, Avery. Thank you for that. He's been having a rough week." Andrew nodded. "I understand. Transitions can be hard at this age. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." We started talking, first at school events, then over coffee, then at dinner. He was patient and kind, completely different from Nathan in all the ways that mattered. He listened when I spoke. He remembered the little things. He never made me feel like I was invisible. A year later, I moved in with Andrew. It was a big step, and I was terrified. But I'd learned something important from my failed marriage. Fear wasn't a reason to say no. Fear was just an obstacle you had to push through to get to what you wanted. The kids loved Andrew. Lily followed him around like a shadow, asking him endless questions about everything. Noah adored him, climbing into his lap whenever he sat down. Andrew was patient and playful, a natural father figure who never tried to replace Nathan, but instead created his own bond with them. Nathan, meanwhile, was struggling. His relationship with Lauren had fallen apart shortly after the baby was born. He'd tried to make it work, but the foundation was built on lies and infidelity, and it couldn't support the weight of reality. He was paying child support for 2 different families now, and his financial situation was precarious. He'd been passed over for a promotion at work, and rumors about his affair had spread through the office. He was lonely, bitter, and full of regret. He called me one night, drunk and rambling. "I should have fought harder," he said. "I should have never let you go. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away." I listened without interrupting. I didn't feel sympathy for him, but I also didn't feel anger. I just felt nothing. He was a part of my past, not my present. "Nathan," I said calmly, "I've moved on. I've found someone who treats me the way I deserve to be treated. I've built a life for myself and for our children. I hope you can do the same, but please don't call me again. Not like this." He was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said, "but sorry isn't enough. It never was." I hung up and went back to bed. Andrew was asleep beside me, his arm draped across my waist. I curled into him, feeling his warmth and his steady breathing. I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. Mother's Day came around again, and this time, it was different. Andrew took the kids to the store and let them pick out gifts. They came back with a hand-drawn card from Lily, a macaroni necklace from Noah, and a bouquet of flowers from Andrew. He made me breakfast, gave me a massage, and told me I was the most amazing mother he'd ever met. I cried, not from sadness, but from joy, from the overwhelming relief of being loved properly. That afternoon, I sat on the couch with my children and watched them play. Lily was drawing pictures of our new family, and Noah was building a tower out of blocks. Andrew was in the kitchen, cleaning up the dishes, humming a tune I didn't recognize. The chaos was still there. There would always be chaos, but it was different now. It was the chaos of a real family, a family built on trust and love and mutual respect. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the woman who'd stood in her bedroom, clutching a receipt, wondering where her life had gone wrong. That woman had been broken and lost and full of doubt, but she'd found her strength. She'd found her voice. She'd walked away from a man who didn't deserve her and built a life that was entirely her own. I didn't hate Nathan anymore. I didn't hate Lauren either. They'd hurt me, yes, but they'd also given me a gift. They'd shown me who I really was. They'd forced me to stop settling for less than I deserved. I looked at my children, my beautiful children, and I knew that I'd made the right choice. Divorce wasn't a failure. It was a second chance, a chance to be happy, a chance to be seen, a chance to love and be loved in return. Andrew came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He sat down beside me and took my hand. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes and warmed my chest. "I'm perfect," I said, and I meant it. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, I sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. I'd always loved the stars. They reminded me that even in the darkest nights, there was light. Even in the deepest pain, there was hope. I thought about the diamonds Nathan had bought for another woman. They'd been a symbol of everything that was wrong with my marriage. The secrecy, the deception, the lack of care. But diamonds weren't the measure of love. Diamonds were just things, shiny and cold, unable to offer comfort or warmth. Real love was different. Real love was a hand in the dark, a kiss on the forehead, a promise kept. I didn't need diamonds anymore. I had something better. I had a family that loved me, a partner who chose me every day, and a future that was mine to shape. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan had forgotten Mother's Day, but he'd remembered his colleague's birthday with diamonds. And in the end, I was the one who'd won. I'd won back myself. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs. The stars twinkled overhead, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere out there, Nathan was probably sitting in his empty apartment, wondering where it all went wrong. Lauren was probably struggling with a baby and a failed relationship, but I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'd take the kids to the park. Tomorrow, I'd start a new painting. Tomorrow, I'd kiss Andrew and tell him I loved him. Tomorrow was full of possibility, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to meet it.